If you don't like it, go complain at the gate.
Our father booked these seats. You can check the record. Every time we're told to wait, to be quiet. Not today.
Not everyone gets to sit up front. Take it or leave it.
We paid for first class. That is our right. Stop pretending this is a system error. You just don't want us there.
If you don't leave now, we'll call the police.
Boss Rice.
Go ahead, call them. I have nothing to hide.
We're not asking for favors. We're asking for what we bought.
Around them, the crowd hushed, the hum of suitcase wheels falling silent, as if the entire gate inhaled at once. And in that stillness, the question thundered louder than the engines outside. When rules are used to strip away dignity, who will speak for justice? But then, an unexpected decision froze the whole concourse in disbelief. You have the choice now. Do you agree with how she fought back? Share your thoughts below, and like this channel to keep the message alive. Chicago O'Hare stirred awake beneath a cool autumn light, the kind that made jet bridges gleam and the skyline feel a little closer than it really was. Rolling suitcases hummed over tile, coffee steamed from paper cups, and the public address voice unspooled steady reminders about unattended bags and boarding priorities. Aliyah, Carter, and her twin sister Imani moved with the flow toward the premium check-in counters. Coats folded over their forearms, eyes bright with a plan that felt bigger than a single flight to Boston. Their father's voice reminding them, "Stay strong and trust yourselves," echoes in their minds as they step into the crowded terminal. The words steady their breathing the way a hand at the small of the back steadies a dancer entering the stage. They had dressed for comfort and respect, dark jeans without fray, soft sweaters the color of toasted oats, sneakers clean enough to reflect gate lights. At the counter, the agent's name badge caught the glow of Ethan Miller, his tie a conservative blue, his smile practiced and thin. The first-class placard at his shoulder promised efficiency. The empty stanchion line promised the same. Aliyah offered their passports and the printed confirmations their father had insisted they carry, even though mobile boarding passes would have sufficed. The printer behind Ethan ticked and hummed like a small, opinionated machine deciding the fate of strangers. "Good morning," Aliyah said, her voice warm and even. "We're headed to Boston Logan." "Sure," Ethan replied, eyes not quite landing on them, fingertips already tapping a rhythm on the keyboard. "Last name?" "Carter," Imani said. "First class." Ethan's tap slowed. His gaze lifted, scanned their faces, dropped again to the screen. "First class," he repeated, as if tasting unfamiliar syllables. "All right." Around them, the airport played his American Symphony. A child negotiating for a blueberry muffin, a business traveler coaxing a zipper closed, the sigh of a suitcase settling into a scale. The Lincoln Park Harvest Fest banners had bled orange and gold onto newsstands and overhead monitors, a reminder that the city loved its seasons and its parades. Somewhere beyond the terminal glass, a breeze was tipping leaves into gutters along Michigan Avenue. Inside, the air conditioning made scarves feel reasonable. Ethan's printer sputtered. He frowned, then offered a smile that didn't touch his eyes. "I'm seeing an irregularity," he said. "Ticket class code mismatch, maybe a duplicate purchase." His keyboard clacked. "It happens." Aliyah leaned forward slightly. "Is there a problem with the reservation?" "Our father booked directly through the airline." "Could be a system issue," Ethan murmured. "Could be something else." He flicked a glance past their shoulders toward the man behind them, who shifted his briefcase from one hand to the other, then called, "Next," over their heads before he had finished with the twins. The briefcase man stepped around with the choreography of someone used to stepping around. Imani's jaw tightened. "We were here first." Ethan lifted a palm, traffic cop calm. "Ma'am, I'll be with you when I'm ready." Aliyah felt the heat in Imani's posture and placed a light hand on her sister's sleeve. "It's all right," she said softly, but in the private language of twins, the touch meant, "Wait, not surrender." The agent finished with the briefcase man in a flurry of chipper small talk about the weather in Charlotte, then returned to the twins with a sigh reserved for items misfiled and drawers left ajar. "Here's what I can do," he said. "I'll reissue your boarding passes." The printer coughed again. 2 slips slid out, matte and official. He set them on the counter with the quiet finality of a bill at a diner. Aliyah's eyes went to the cabin code first, a habit formed from years of their father's exactness. The letters did not say first. "Economy?" she asked, careful to keep wonder from curdling into accusation. "Seat assignment change," Ethan replied, smoothing a corner of paper. "It's a busy route. First class isn't limitless." Imani's breath shortened. "We paid for those seats." A beat passed, delicate and dangerous. In that beat, Aliyah remembered their father insisting on printed confirmations. She remembered he had said to call only in an emergency. She remembered the Harvest Fest, the warmth of cider on the tongue, the ease of strangers who believed the world made room for them. She also remembered the way doors sometimes shrank when she and her sister approached, the way thresholds grew higher in places designed for walking through. "Could you check again?" Aliyah asked. "We were on a college tour," Our father booked first class so we could rest and arrive on time. Ethan adjusted his tie, an unnecessary gesture. Student travel is important, he said, voice dipping toward a tone that pretends empathy while withdrawing service. But there are rules. Student IDs aren't primary identification. And first class has standards. Maybe the system corrected the reservation. Imani's eyebrows rose. Standards? Ethan looked at the screen, not at them. You'll need to be at the gate early, he said. Security can take longer these days. Put your liquids in a clear bag, laptops out, belts off, you know the drill. They did know the drill. Everyone in America knew the drill. From the repetitive choreography of plastic bins to the polite stripping of shoes that turned a line of travelers into a row of penitent parishioners. Aaliyah breathed in, tasting coffee and lemon cleanser. We'd still like our original seats, she said. Could you bring a supervisor? Or check the payment record? Ethan's smile became porcelain. The supervisor's busy. He tapped another key. Look, I'm trying to help here. Not everyone gets to sit up front. Silence rose like a tide and then receded. The terminal resumed its murmur. A couple in fleece vests compared boarding groups. A teenager in a varsity jacket rehearsed an apology into his phone. A janitor in a reflective vest coaxed a shy litter bag into a new metal mouth. Somewhere, a departure board blinked a gate change like a small betrayal. Imani pressed both palms to the counter. We're not asking for an exception. We're asking for what we bought. A glance flickered across Ethan's face. Something like impatience painted over with policy. I've reissued your passes. You can address seat concerns at the gate, he said, enunciating each category of authority as if stacking boxes that must not mix. Check-in, security, gate. His hand nudged the slips forward. You were welcome. Aaliyah picked up the passes, feeling their lightness, as if paper could pretend to be air. She could feel Imani's next words coiling, ready to spring. And she did the only thing that would keep the day from breaking this early. She touched her sister's arm again, an anchor disguised as affection. Let's go, she said, the gentleness in her voice, an act of stewardship, was sorted out at the gate. They stepped away from the counter into the current of travelers. A family negotiated stroller wheels and a sack of cinnamon pretzels. A retired couple discussed museum passes in low contented tones. The loudspeaker called a boarding group with the rhythm of a lullaby that did not include their names. Aaliyah folded the new boarding passes into the pocket of her tote, where the first-class confirmations waited like proof of a truth someone had tried to erase. Imani looked sideways. We shouldn't let that slide. We want, Aaliyah said. We'll document everything. At the gate, we'll ask again. If we have to, we'll call. The last word weighed more than its letters, because it meant their father and his steady baritone and the way problem-solving changed when he stepped into a room. They moved past the premium line where a man in a crisp blazer received a handshake that came with an extra smile. They moved past a rack of magazines announcing fall recipes and a healthier self by New Year's Day. They moved past a map of the terminal where a cheerful dot declared you are here, a truth that felt incomplete without the companion phrase, and you belong. At the edge of the stanchions, Aaliyah paused and turned. For a breath, she regarded the check-in counter as if it were a stage set, every prop in its place, every line delivered as rehearsed. She understood, with the clarity of someone who has learned to read rooms, that she and her sister had just been measured against a standard that had nothing to do with seat width or ticket class. The understanding did not undo the harm, but it gave shape to the path ahead. Record, request, remain composed, repeat. Imani followed her gaze. Next time, I'm saying something, she murmured. There will be a next time, Aaliyah answered. But we choose when and how. She lifted her chin toward the security checkpoint, where gray trays waited like nesting birds. Let's keep moving. They joined the river of travelers again. Overhead, a sponsor's jingle promised a smoother journey with the right credit card. To their right, a barista slid a latte across a counter with the grace of a violinist releasing a final note. In front of them, a mother tucked a blanket around a sleeping toddler, then smiled at the twins with the tired kindness of strangers who recognized effort. The twins smiled back and stepped forward, shoulder to shoulder. Back at the counter, Ethan watched them go, then looked down at the empty rectangle where their boarding passes had been. He tugged his cuffs and exhaled through his nose, a gesture that felt like private applause. He raised his voice just enough to carry, the words falling with the weight of a judgment disguised as customer service. People like you should be grateful to get on at all. The security line curved like a river under bright fluorescent light, and the murmur of instructions rose and fell with the chime of conveyor belts. Aaliyah and Imani joined the queue with their tote straps crossed tight, the new economy boarding passes tucked beside the printed first-class confirmations their father had insisted they carry. Aaliyah felt the paper edges against her fingers and, for a breath, let that small proof steady her. The lane markers advanced, gray bins waited, shoes were untied around them like a quiet ritual America had learned to perform without thinking. Far ahead, an agent lifted her chin, scanned the stream of travelers, and settled her gaze with a precision that felt practiced. Aaliyah glanced at the departure screen and then at Imani. "We'll make the gate," she said, voice calm by design. The words were less a forecast than a promise to keep fear from spreading. The queue narrowed into the document check. The agent's badge read, Karen Johnson. Her tone carried the clipped brightness of someone who considered doubt a challenge and compliance a virtue. She waved the family through with a perfunctory smile and then looked back to the sisters as if arriving at a conclusion already formed. "Step aside," Karen said, pointing to a cordoned lane. "Enhanced screening for both of you." The words hovered a moment before landing. Aaliyah's instinct was courtesy. "Is that necessary? We're trying to make a flight to Boston." "Oh, bye." Karen smiled thin but did not fracture. "Are you questioning security protocols?" She tilted her head toward the secondary lane. Arms length apart, bins ready, laptops out, phones off. Liquids in a quart-sized bag, belts and jackets off. You know the drill. They did know the drill. America knew it. The way a hymn returns to the tongue even when the service has changed. Aaliyah lifted her laptop into a bin, placed her sweater beside it, and lined up her shoes with a careful grace learned from years of living where scrutiny could be a storm. Imani exhaled through her nose and did the same. On the main line, a steady stream of white passengers stepped through the scanner with minimal interruption, collecting their belongings with the ease of a handshake. In the secondary lane, time slowed into deliberate increments, each instruction pulled like taffy. Karen tapped the bin with a pen, everything out of the bag. She turned to another agent. "We'll need a manual search." Aaliyah unzipped her tote, the movement neat, revealing notebooks, a paper bag with a bent corner, a soft pouch of chargers, and a small bottle with a pharmacy label. Karen plucked the laptop from its bin and dragged its edge across the metal lip, leaving a thin scratch like a pale scar. "Careful," Aaliyah said before she could stop herself, gentleness failing to hide alarm. "That is my schoolwork." Karen looked up, voice cool. "If you're concerned about your property, you can opt not to fly." She lifted the bottle between two fingers. "What is this?" "Fexofenadine," Aaliyah answered, keeping her tone steady. "For allergies. My legal name is on the label." Karen turned the bottle slowly, as if waiting for it to confess. Will set it aside. She made a small show of placing it near a sign that warned about prohibited items, as though proximity alone could stain reputation. Around them, the line hummed with ordinary patience. The child from earlier asked for another sip of apple juice. A couple debated museum passes for a city they had not yet reached. The conveyor belt squeaked and thudded like a metronome set a little too slow. A second agent, tall and impassive, gestured to a painted pair of footprints. Arms out, feet apart, palms up. Imani stepped into position, shoulders firming under the fluorescent wash. The pat-down was more thorough than necessary, hands lingering where efficiency would have sufficed. Karen watched with an expression that tried to pass for neutrality and failed at the corners. The scanner beeped. The tall agent peered at the display and then at Imani's hair with clinical interest. Karen's comment arrived like a pebble flicked into a pond, each word sending out a ripple. "Always have to check these hairstyles. You'd be surprised what people hide." Silence shifted in the lane, not empty but full of things unsaid. An older white woman, 2 positions back, fished her phone from her purse and lifted it chest high, angling for a discreet recording. A supervisor materialized almost immediately, a man with a square jaw and a voice polished by repetition. "Ma'am, recording security procedures is not permitted. Please put the phone away." "Wah." "It's not right," the woman said, heat in her whisper. "They're just kids and you re. Phone away," the supervisor repeated, patience stretched thin. "Or we can take this to the office." The woman lowered the phone, shame and defiance mixed on her face in equal measure, and the moment dissolved into the churn of bins and belts. Aaliyah stood where she had been placed, palms open, the pose of a person proving nothing is hidden. The metal wand traced a path near her hairline. The agent's touch pressed and moved like the ghost of a comb. When the pat-down finished, the second agent nodded toward the table. Repack. They gathered their things with care. The laptop wore its fresh scratch. The medication waited in the shadow of the sign like a harmless object cast as suspect. Aaliyah slid it into her tote with the label facing inward, not out of guilt, but out of a weary instinct for self-preservation. Imani zipped her bag hard enough to make the teeth clack. The belt conveyor stalled, then lurched, delivering a cascade of gray bins that bumped each other with dull knocks. Karen leaned an elbow on the table and spoke with the brittle brightness of someone narrating a training video. "See? That wasn't so bad. Stay on this side while we log the secondary screening." Her pen scratched across a clipboard as if the movement itself could certify the fairness of what had just transpired. A family passed in the main lane, the father balancing a toddler with one arm and a diaper bag with the other, his smile easy, his path unimpeded. A businessman collected his leather belt and fed it through loops with a practiced flick, the buckle ringing softly as if pleased to be back in place. The sisters stood where they had been told, waiting for permission to move in a space they had already paid to pass through. When the clipboard page was finally full of boxes and initials, Karen straightened. "You're free to go," she said, the phrase landing like a verdict generously reduced. "Remember, phones away in the screening area, and no liquids over the limit." She looked past them for the next selection, eyes scanning with a hunter's focus under the decorum of a uniform. Aaliyah slipped her feet back into her shoes and tied the laces with deliberate calm. "Thank you," she said. Because courtesy was a choice, she refused to surrender. She reached for her tote and felt the confirmations again. The crispness of paper that told the truth, even when a system would not. Imani watched the main lane, watched the ease flowing there like water, and swallowed a sound that could have become anger. They stepped beyond the metal detectors into the space where America tells itself the hard part is over. Travelers reunited with their belts and their earrings and their small containers of shampoo. The floor bore the scuffs of 1,000 wheels. The air held a faint smell of sanitizer and coffee. The public address voice announced a final call for a destination that was not theirs, counting time in syllables that sounded almost kind. At a side table, the older woman who had tried to record hesitated and then caught Aaliyah's eye. She made a small, apologetic motion with her hand, as if to say, "I saw." Aaliyah nodded once with a gratitude that did not excuse the failure of a system but honored the courage of a single person within it. Imani's posture softened a fraction, then reset. The two of them moved together, practiced in the way twins learn to shift weight so neither stumbles. Beyond the checkpoint, a barista in a green apron slid a latte across the counter with the ease of a musician releasing a final note. A janitor guided a wide mop in slow arcs, coaxing shine from the tiles. A child clutched a plush airplane and hummed a tune that had only one note. Ordinary life went on, indifferent, and therefore, somehow, both comforting and cruel. Aaliyah checked the time in her head, translating it into gaze and distances. The economy boarding passes felt wrong in her pocket, a mislabeling that tried to shrink them. She breathed once, deeply, and let the breath carry out what she could not use. "We'll eat something quick," she said. Then, straight to the gate. "We'll ask them to fix the seats." The plan was sensible, rooted in the kind of hope that grows in people who have learned to turn every indignity into documentation and every delay into a path forward. Imani's reply began as a laugh without humor. She looked back toward the checkpoint where Karen had returned to scanning faces the way a fisherman reads a current. She looked down at their hands, one still steady from the contact with paper-proof, one curled briefly and then relaxed. When she spoke, she kept her voice low, a sentence a wire pulled taut between control and truth, a sentence that would not be mistaken for anything but what it was. "This isn't security, it's humiliation. How much more can we take?" The corridor opened into a bright concourse where the smell of pizza and roasted tomatoes drifted like a promise that the day could soften. Aaliyah slowed near the directory and touched Imani's elbow, choosing steadiness over speed. "Let's just eat something quick before the gate. We'll be fine." The words were meant to paste a little comfort over what the checkpoint had peeled away. They crossed toward the restaurant with its cheerful sign, the glass front revealing warm light, brass rails, and small tables set with paper napkins folded into tidy triangles. A chalkboard near the host stand advertised a seasonal special and a slice of Chicago deep dish, the letters dusted with flower fingerprints that made the offer feel human. Inside, voices layered into an easy afternoon murmur. Plates slid onto runners, baristas hissed milk to a satin finish. A server carried a tower of pizzas with the poise of a skater holding a candle. The hostess wore a name tag that read Madison Clark and a smile that hovered at the border between greeting and gatekeeping. She glanced at the twins, then at the seating chart, then back at them as if the act of looking twice could create a new rule. "Table for two, please," Aaliyah said, holding the request with a warmth that tried to meet the room at its level. Madison lifted her brows, sympathetic without being helpful. "It'll be a 45-minute wait. Our way." Aaliyah followed the hostess' gaze and saw at least 3 open tables, each reset with silverware and a votive that made a small, brave flame in the daylight. "Is their list?" she asked, not accusing, only asking how to belong. Madison tipped a pen toward a clipboard. "I can put you on." Her handwriting formed neat loops as if neatness alone could certify fairness. She tore a pager from its charger, then paused. "Actually, we're not using these right now. If you want to wait nearby, I'll call your names." Imani, foot tapping, pointed gently. "What about those open tables?" "Reserved," Madison said, the word landing lightly, like a napkin placed over something you are not intended to see. A family stepped through the doors behind the sisters, laughter loosened by the prospect of a meal. The father wore a fleece vest and a happy fatigue. Madison's smile brightened 2 shades and, without checking the chart, she waved them in. "You made it," she sang, as if they shared a private joke. "Right this way." She led the family to one of the open tables, menus already in her hand. Imani's breath rose. "But you said..." Madison's tone softened in a way that hardened the message. "We honor reservations first, of course." She set down 2 menus and pulled back chairs the twins were not invited to fill. Those guests called ahead. Aaliyah folded her hands. Could we speak with the manager? We have a flight to catch, and we only need a quick bite. Madison nodded with a professionalism that felt like a closed door and stepped into the passage that led to the kitchen. The room kept moving. Cutlery chimed, ice waterfall into glasses. A television near the bar scrolled headlines without sound, while a bartender added a twist of lemon to a drink with patient wrists. The seasonal banner outside the window swayed a little in the air conditioning, an autumn leaf pretending to float. The manager arrived with a stride meant to convey command. His badge read Robert Hayes, his tie a deeper blue than Ethan's had been, his face lined with long shifts. He offered a neutral smile that signaled rules were about to be recited. What seems to be the issue? Aaliyah met him halfway, keeping her tone measured. We asked for a table for 2. We were told it would be 45 minutes, but we just saw guests be seated immediately at an empty table. We only have time for something quick. Robert glanced at the chart without reading it. We're at capacity for walk-ins. Some parties have priority holds. If you want takeout, we can do that. Imani looked at the bar where 2 stools sat empty, their chrome footrests gleaming like options. What about the bar? We can eat there. The bar is full service, Robert said, turning to look. Those seats are on hold. He drew himself up a fraction. Please lower your voice. Other guests are dining. The sentence did not need a volume indicator. It was about place, not sound. Aaliyah nodded, refusing to rise to the invitation to be the problem. We can wait a few minutes, she said. Could you let us know if anything opens up? We're happy to pay and tip well. We just need to make our flight. Robert's smile cooled. Tips are discretionary. Service is not guaranteed when the restaurant is at capacity. If you're in a hurry, I recommend the food court. The words slid into place the way a suitcase slides into a trunk that has already decided what it can carry. Aaliyah felt Imani tense beside her and threaded her voice through the afternoon like a stitch meant to hold something together. We'll give it a few minutes. Sorry. From the corner of her eye, she noticed a server watching. A woman with a dark braid coiled at the nape of her neck and a patience that looked practiced rather than passive. Her name tag read Elena Rodriguez. She balanced a tray of carbonara with one hand and, as she passed, let a napkin fall, crouching to retrieve it near the host stand so she could speak low enough to be a current rather than a wave. I saw, Elena said, eyes flicking toward Madison and Robert, then back to the sisters. It happens all the time. She slipped 2 paper vouchers from her apron, the corners soft from being handled. I can comp your drinks and get you takeout faster through the bar printer. You should not have to wait like this. Aaliyah's gratitude moved forward first. Thank you, she said. The words carried more meaning than they declared. Imani's mouth softened around the smallest smile, relief and weariness touching for a breath. Elena straightened as Robert returned, and the temperature of the moment shifted. Is there a problem? He asked, his tone shaping the problem as a person rather than a circumstance. No, Aaliyah said, meeting his gaze. We're deciding whether to take out. Robert nodded without nuance. Good. He angled his body in a way that fenced the conversation. You can place the order at the bar. If you raise your voice again or interfere with service, I'll have to involve security. The words did not arrive loud. Their softness made them heavier. Imani could have met force with force, could have said everything the moment deserved. But she felt Aaliyah's steady presence at her side, and the steadiness planted her feet. We were not interfering. Imani said evenly. We were ordering pasta. Robert's eyes cooled another degree. Make it quick. He turned away as if the conversation had been a door he was done with, the hinge already closing. They moved to the corner of the bar where Elena had placed 2 heavy menus, already flagged at the fastest items. She whispered, I'll ring the order under my number. I'll go faster that way. And she glanced toward the host stand and then back. If you need a statement later, I'll be your witness. The offer didn't shout. It was a candle slid toward them across a dark table. Aaliyah felt the day reorganize around that small blaze of trust. We appreciate you, she said softly. Elena scribbled on a small pad rigatoni, a margarita slice, 2 lemonades, and slid the paper into a slot by the espresso machine where the printer could catch it on the first try. She tapped the bartender's shoulder and murmured, and within moments 2 lemonades appeared with their rims beating cold. On me, the bartender said. Not loudly, but loud enough to lay a gentle line in the sand. At the end of the bar, a couple in Cobb's caps chatted with the server about the Harvest Fest. The server laughed and said he always tipped 20% because good work deserved it, and the couple nodded and added that holiday weekends were busy and patience mattered. Ordinary conversation worked its medicine. Aaliyah let the rhythm of it loosen something in her chest. The kitchen pass glittered with heat, and Elena moved with a smooth confidence, negotiating the dance between tables and the bar. Madison stood by the host stand and pretended not to watch. Robert, arms crossed, scanned the room the way a lifeguard scans a pool. Alert for splashes. He did not plan to cause, but definitely planned to punish. The printer chirped. Elena lifted the bag that held the twins' order, checked the receipt, and folded the top precisely. She slipped the 2 vouchers into the outside sleeve and added her first name in pen with a short note. If anyone asks, I saw what happened. She placed the bag in front of them as if placing a small shield. Thank you, Aaliyah said. The words were simple and full, and she met Elena's eyes fully so the thanks would land where it should. Elena nodded, voice quiet. Safe flight. They turned to go, the bag warm in Aaliyah's hand, the lemonades bright as a pause. And then, as if the day could not let them leave without a final instruction in who decided what, Robert stepped forward with a measured smile. Just a reminder, he said, next time, approach the host stand with patience. We have procedures. If you can't follow them, we'll have to call security. The word security did not crash. It drifted down like dust, catching light, proof of something in the air that should not be there. Elena's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Madison arranged 2 menus that did not need arranging. Aaliyah thanked the bartender again, thanked Elena again, and guided Imani toward the exit. The doors parted with a hush. Outside, the concourse breathed them back into its wider rhythm. A saxophone further down the hall bent a note into something like forgiveness. A janitor lifted a hand in greeting as he steered a cart loaded with plates back to the dish room. The airport had resumed its story, and the sisters stepped into their paragraph. Imani studied the bag and the vouchers tucked beneath the staple receipt, the handwriting proof that someone had chosen to see. Her fingers tightened, then steadied, and she looked toward the direction of the gates, where the blue signs led people who believed arrival was a matter of walking. She spoke softly, so the words would land on their feet and stand. If even lunch is a battlefield, what will happen at the gate? The concourse funneled them toward gate C18, where a cluster of wheeled suitcases formed a patient raft, and the announcement chime threaded through conversations like a careful seam. The overhead screens cycled through cities and times, while the boarding podium glowed with that particular airline polished the lacquer of procedure. Aaliyah slowed, feeling the soft weight of the takeout bag in her tote and the firmer weight of printed confirmations. The lemon brightness had faded from the drinks, but the kindness that brought them had not. She heard Elena's whisper again, as clearly as if the server stood beside her. It happens all the time. The sentence folded itself into the moment, like a line of underlining. Imani adjusted her coat and studied the faces around them. The tired parents, the efficient solo travelers, the couple comparing podcasts, and the American crowd, bound together by the simple expectation that a ticket meant passage. The boarding agent's badge read Stephen Collins. He had the clipped neatness of someone who ironed in the evening and the smile of a man who could apologize without changing anything. Next, he said, and the word drew a bead on the twins. Aaliyah stepped forward with the poise of someone who had rehearsed courtesy the way a musician rehearses scales. She offered the passes. Stephen took them as if taking possession, scanned the barcodes with a small pistol of a device, and frowned at a message only he could see. These look unusual, he said, letting the pause do as much work as the adjective. I'll need to verify. Laughter, Imani's mouth opened before she could stop it, a reflex against the sting of familiar patterns. We've been through the TSA and the check-in mess already. Then maybe you should be used to it, Stephen replied, voice patient enough to call itself professionalism. He set the passes on the counter, close to his side of the line that separated him from the waiting. His fingers hovered above a keyboard as if even typing their names could be a concession. Aaliyah resisted the urge to recite the details of the reservation like scripture fare class, record locator, seat numbers that had been theirs before some invisible hand dragged them into another row. Could you please check the payment record? She asked instead. We have printed confirmations, if that helps. Stephen tapped and tapped again. The system shows a downgrade, he said finally. Sometimes inventory shifts. It is not a perfect world. He shook his head with the sadness of a meteorologist delivering bad weather. You can take it up with the supervisor. He paged without looking at them. A few breaths later, a woman approached with a measured stride and a uniform that fit like resolve. Her name tag read Angela Brooks, and there was a quiet authority to the way she nodded to Stephen, then to the twins, as if she already understood the scene and the script. For a moment, hope rose in Aaliyah like a small bird, too cautious to sing but present all the same. Afternoon, Angela said. What seems to be the issue? Stephen gestured to the screen. Reservation anomaly. First class to economy. They are concerned. Angela took in the twins with a glance that read more than it revealed. Aaliyah kept her voice level. We were booked in first class. At check-in, the agent reissued economy passes without explanation. We tried to ask, but he told us to address it at the gate. Angela's mouth drew into a line that could have been sympathy or restraint. Sometimes systems behave in ways we do not love, she said. Let me see what I can do. She angled the monitor toward herself. The cursor flickered. A line of code scrolled the way weather scrolls. Around them, the line squared its shoulders and waited. A toddler pointed at an airplane and mispronounced wonder. The chime sounded again, and another city blinked. Here's the thing, Angela said at last, her tone turning advisory, as if she were handing down a recipe in a kitchen where the heat could not be adjusted. Sometimes we need to be twice as polite to be accepted. The sentence found its target. It was not a solution. It was a lesson. Aliyah felt it pass through her like a cold draft in a warm house. Imani absorbed it like flint absorbs a strike. She folded her arms and then unfolded them, choosing the posture of patience because someone had to. Could you reinstate the original seats? Aliyah asked, the question shaped by breath and evidence. She slid the printed confirmations across the counter so the weight of paper might tip the balance. Angela glanced at the pages and then at Stephen. Inventory is closed. We can place you on the list for any last-minute adjustments, but I cannot promise. The phrasing cleaned the edges of refusal without dulling the blade. She leaned in, voice lower. Approach this calmly. We can avoid misunderstandings. Imani's laugh was barely a sound. This is not a misunderstanding. Stephen turned to the microphone and spoke to the gate area. Attention all passengers traveling to Boston. We will begin pre-boarding shortly. The announcement wore a smile that the speaker did not. He set the Twins economy passes in front of him again, close to the territory he controlled. For everyone's comfort, he added, looking directly at Imani as if she were already the cause of a discomfort that had not yet occurred. Aliyah inhaled, exhaled, let the breath do what it could. We will wait, she said. We will also document this. She kept her tone even, not a threat, not a plea, simply a record entered into the ledger of the day. Stephen pretended not to hear. He called pre-boarding for passengers needing extra time, then boarding for active duty service members, then for families with small children, each category granting access to the jet bridge like a key that unlocks a door designed to be locked. The line moved, a steady ribbon feeding the aircraft. Aliyah and Imani waited as instructed, every fiber in them wanting only the ordinariness the microphone promised. When their group finally reached the podium again, Stephen lifted the passes with forced patience. He scanned the first, then the second. The scanner emitted a tone that was not quite a denial and not quite an invitation. He frowned with practiced concern. Now I am seeing an additional flag, he said. Possible duplicate credentials. We need to hold you here. Imani blinked. Duplicate credentials? We have one reservation. Those are our names. Angela reappeared, drawn by a sense for heat. What is the delay? Security check, Stephen said, pronouncing the phrase like a charm that protects and excludes. He looked past the twins, raised his hand as if blessing the next passenger, and said, next. A murmur rose in the nearby seats, the way a crowd hums when it recognizes a story it has heard before. Phones shifted in hands. Camera apps opened with quiet clicks. Someone whispered, this again, and the syllables threaded through the air like a warning. Aliyah placed both hands on the counter, not hard, not soft. We have been patient, she said. We have complied at every turn. We are asking for the seats we purchased and the dignity the ticket implies. Angela's eyes searched Aliyah's face, perhaps for anger, perhaps for a reason to offer help, perhaps for permission to keep the machine running as it always ran. She sighed, a sound too human for the tools she commanded. I will speak with operations, she said. She took a step back and lifted her radio. Imani leaned closer to her sister. This is the same script, she said. Different actors, same lines. Before Aliyah could answer, Stephen tipped the microphone away from the crowd and toward a smaller channel. His voice dropped into the register staff use when they want to sound urgent without sounding alarm. Security to C-18. He said, we have a situation. The words landed with a hush of snow, soft and absolute. Heads turned. A man in a ball cap muttered that he had seen this on television and never thought he would see it in person. A woman in a cardigan angled her phone. The red record dot glowed like a tiny lighthouse in agitated water. A backpack thumped to the floor as its owner sat down hard, uncertainty taking the strength from her knees. The plane door remained open at the end of the corridor, a square of possibility held at the far edge of procedure. Aliyah felt the old lesson again, how quickly a request can be recast as a threat when made by certain mouths in certain bodies. She straightened, every gesture deliberate, a broadcast of calm in a frequency that might still be heard. We are not a situation, she said, not loudly, but with clarity. We are passengers. Stephen's smile did not change. Angela returned with her radio at her shoulder, voice wrapped around compromise. I can offer you main cabin seats on the next flight, she said. It departs later this evening. If you remain calm now, we can make this as smooth as possible. Imani blinked back a frustrated heat. Remain calm now, she repeated, tasting the shape of the request. After the check-in, after the search, after the restaurant, after this, remain calm now. Angela took the words without flinching. Sometimes calm is what gets you through, she said. The sentence wanted to be a bomb and became a mirror. A pair of uniformed airport officers appeared at the edge of the gate area, their walk heavy with the authority of arrival. Conversation stuttered and resumed. Cameras adjusted focus. The officers did not yet speak. Their presence did enough. Aliyah lifted the printed confirmations again and held them at chest level, as if a document could be a shield. We have proof of purchase. she said. We have been moved from our seats without cause. We are asking for correction, not concession. Stephen looked past the confirmations as if paper were translucent. For the safety and comfort of all guests, he said, please step aside while we resolve this. He arranged his face into a look he had probably practiced in the mirror on mornings when certainty felt thin. We appreciate your cooperation. The line continued to move around them, the ribbon tucking into the airplane's door. The smell of recirculated air drifted down the jet bridge like the faintest echo of a promise. Imani felt her pulse in her throat and then, slowly, felt it lower. Because there are times when lowering the pulse is the only way to keep the moment from breaking you while you find another way through. Angela shifted, and for a second her eyes carried something like apology, a fleeting weather pattern across an official sky. It passed quickly. Please, she said, do not make this harder than it needs to be. The sentence had been told to 1,000 people in 1,000 rooms. It always meant the same thing. Consent to what is happening and call it peace. Imani looked at Angela and at the uniform that should have meant help, at the badge that should have signaled ally, at the mouth-forming phrases meant to soothe the wound while keeping the knife in place. She felt the weight of the day and the distance to the plane, and she let a simple truth rise. If even she won't stand up for us, who will? The jet bridge exhaled a low mechanical hum, a tunnel of brushed metal and warm light that made the aircraft door look close enough to reach with a long breath. Behind them, the gate area carried on, not quite aware that a handful of phone clips had begun hopping from one account to another, tiny lanterns of attention the sisters could not yet see. Aliyah kept her toed high on her shoulder and her pace even, as if steadiness could earn passage. Imani matched her, a fraction closer than before, as if proximity could change the rules. At the podium where the jetway met the threshold, a staffer in a safety vest stepped into their lane with a practice pivot. His badge read Brian O'Connor. He had the wary confidence of someone who believed the corridor belonged to him. Brian held out a hand. Passes. He scanned the first, then the second, the device chirping once, and then again with an odd, unsettled note. He frowned, the expression more theater than surprise. These tickets are void. The sentence hit with the soft thud of a suitcase tipping off its wheels. Aliyah stayed composed. That cannot be right. Our father purchased these seats directly. We cleared every checkpoint and were told to resolve the seat issue at the gate. She lifted the printed confirmation so the airline's own paper could stand in their corner. Brian did not look. He angled his body, a human turnstile. Not my problem, he said. Step aside so I can keep the line moving. Imani glanced past him at the open aircraft door, a rectangle of recirculated air and lamplight that should have meant relief. We are not blocking anyone, she said, voice level. We are asking you to scan again. He scanned again, more for show than for hope. The device made the same unhelpful tone. You have been downgraded and flagged, he said, and the word flagged hung there, a label that tried to do the work of proof. Please step out of the boarding lane. Passengers pressed gently forward, an older couple murmuring about connecting trains, a college kid balancing a backpack and a guitar case, a parent rocking a stroller with one foot, each of them held in the middle distance by uncertainty. Aliyah moved no closer to the door and no farther from it. Sir, she said, we have documentation. If there is an internal system issue, there is also an internal remedy. Brian's mouth flattened. The internal remedy is to follow instructions. He tipped his chin at the ramp behind them. Security can assist if you cannot comply. The phrase reached a pair of uniforms before it reached the sisters. Officer James Turner and Officer Mike Harris appeared at the bend where the jet bridge narrowed, their steps heavy, their faces arranged in that particular neutrality that sits between caution and command. One of them spoke into a shoulder mic, not loud, but with the kind of calm that is meant to reorganize a situation simply by naming it. Aliyah turned slightly so both officers could see her hands open at her sides. We are trying to board with valid documents, she said, her tone steady enough to trust the tray too. Our seats were changed without consent. We have asked for a supervisor. We are not raising our voices. We are not obstructing traffic. Brian folded his arms. Phones down, he added, glancing at Imani's pocket as if the idea of a camera were a spark near dry grass. Or, we will escort you out. A hush fell that was not really silence, but the collecting of breath. The couple with the guitar stopped whispering. The stroller wheels stopped rocking. Somewhere back in the gate area, another chime sounded and another boarding group was called for another destination. A reminder that not everyone's story pauses at the same time. Imani felt the old calculus rise. How much to endure? How much to let pass? How much to name? Her chest tightened at the word void, a word that tried to say their presence did not count. She slipped her phone from her pocket with the care of someone handling glass. We have been patient, she said to no one and to everyone. We have been patient at the counter, at security, at lunch, at the gate. We have done everything asked. Officer Turner took a measured step. Ma'am, put the phone away. Why? Imani asked, keeping the camera pointed at the floor, a blur of gray carpet. We are standing here, we are calm, we are being told our tickets are nothing. Wait for that. Recording on the jet bridge is not permitted, he said. The words had the shape of policy and the weight of habit. Put it away or you will be escorted from the area. Aaliyah's hand grazed her sister's sleeve, an anchor disguised as reassurance. She faced Brian again. Scan them at the podium. Scan them at the door. Scan them anywhere a real record lives. Or call someone who can do more than repeat the same refusal. A, B, all there all be. Brian smoothed the edge of a laminated placard as if perfecting the sign could perfect the moment. Step aside, he said. Final notice. Imani lifted the phone. Not high, not defiant, just enough to frame the counter, the scanner, the vest, the officers. Everyone needs to see this, she said, the words even, the syllables landing like small stones placed where a path should be. Officer Harris moved closer, voice pitched low enough to sound reasonable. Ma'am, do not make us take the device. Aaliyah looked from the device to the door and felt the thin fringe of panic press at the edges of her restraint. She pictured the line of small clips she did not know about, the people in distant terminals watching on their own small screens, the way truth gathers when enough eyes are allowed to look. She pictured her father's face. Remember his steady voice telling them to trust themselves, to trust the record, to trust that dignity is a kind of evidence. Brian shook his head as if concluding a simple service refusal. You are not boarding this flight, he said, and the declaration carried all the pleasure of a door clicking shut. The guitar case shifted. The stroller squeaked. A woman further back whispered, let them on, and another voice shushed her, not unkindly, with the tired caution of travelers who have learned how little room there is for asking why. The jet bridge hummed, indifferent. Aaliyah's palm found the confirmation her told again, the paper edges a reminder that something real existed outside the mouth of the machine. She lifted her chin and, in that quiet, chose the line that would cut through the tango with the fewest syllables. She tapped the screen, scrolled to the name that meant resource and refuge, and pressed the call. The tone sounded once, then twice, then connected. Her voice did not shake. Dad, it's happening. We need you now. By this, the jet bridge camera shivered once in Aaliyah's hand and then steadied as a familiar baritone reached them from a wall of screens far away. Not a shout, but a clean line through disorder that everyone could hear. The call from moments before had opened into a secure video feed that filled the gate agent's monitor and the operations display in the corner, and there was Raymond Carter in profile, and then full face, calm and unmistakable, with the operations team behind him at the Wall Street headquarters, and the muted line to O'Hare tying the rooms together like a stitched seam. He did not waste syllables. He identified himself and the relationship that mattered most, named his daughters without ceremony, and set the tone of a house being put back in order. He thanked the officers for keeping the aisle clear, asked them to pause further action, and told Stephen Collins and Brian O'Connor that they would not process another boarding pass until leadership had reviewed the reservation record on file and restored the seats that had been sold. Then he breathed once, the way a pilot breathes before pushing a throttle forward, and invoked the emergency grounding protocol by name. His words measured for legality and for effect. All Skyline departures would hold at their gates, and inbound flights would continue to parking with passengers kept at the jet bridge until contacted. A nationwide pause touching more than 250 flights. Aaliyah listened to the hum of the jet bridge change timber, the way a building sounds different when someone turns off the escalators. She felt her sister lean close, and she knew the pause was not punishment, it was proof that the day had finally met authority equal to its harm. Newsrooms found the feed within minutes, a crawl of captions announcing a company-wide hold, and social timelines sprouted a phrase that traveled like a small flag, passed hand to hand, Skyline Truth, 3 soft syllables that insisted on witnesses. In New York, the boardroom lights brightened, and the conference camera slid on its track, capturing the polished table and the faces around it. Eleanor Kim at the head with a stack of printed agendas, 2 consoles conferring low tones, and Victor Langford already leaned forward, eyes hot and voice cool, ready to turn a crisis into a referendum on the new chief executive. He framed Raymond's order as recklessness, called it vanity disguised as virtue, and said the company's duty was to revenue and schedules, not to a family drama playing out on public channels. Raymond did not match heat with heat. He brought up a sequence of dashboards no investor could shrug away, complaint escalations sorted by station and shift, timestamps that mapped almost perfectly to specific employees, a year of training compliance shortcuts signed off by the same mid-level executives, a pattern of gate downgrades and secondary screenings falling again and again on passengers who looked like his daughters. He played a short audio clip next, authenticated and logged, Victor's voice on the previous day, the diction unmistakable, threatening to teach the new man a lesson if he insisted on publishing a civil rights audit that might upset legacy partners. And the room went still in that expensive way rooms do when everyone's math flips at once. The chair turned to counsel, to operations, to the station manager in Chicago on a separate window, to the duty officer who confirmed that the reservation in question had been correct at the time of purchase and had been touched by 3 employees without documented cause. Raymond did not lift his voice when he named names. He did not call for public ruin. He called for accountability and for repair that would outlast a news cycle. He proposed an independent review with the external ombuds oversight, mandatory anti-bias training with recertification every year, a customer accountability council with the power to recommend discipline, and a guarantee that video collected by bystanders, when lawfully obtained, will be accepted as evidence. He held one more page up to the camera, a short note from a server who had seen what happened in the restaurant, Elena Rodriguez, and he said her name with the respect owed a witness. He finished with a promise no secrecy, no euphemisms, no settling for settlements, and then he yielded the floor. Victor tried to pivot, but the angle would not hold. He mentioned fiduciary duty, and Eleanor Kim answered with a definition that included human dignity in the first clause. She turned to the board and spoke with a clarity that landed in Chicago as if she had been standing at the jet bridge beside Aaliyah and Imani. The board votes with Carter. Effective immediately, Skyline reforms begin. The motion carried and the vote recorded. The chair authorized the protocol. Raymond proposed, and operations began restoring order with a different compass. An apology scripted not by legal fear, but by the obvious truth that a ticket means a promise. Back at the gate, Stephen tried to shape his expression into something like professional regret, but the lines would not hold. The scanner beeped once, the good tone, and the system recognized what it had known all along. A passerby lifted a hand to the sisters in a small salute of luck. One of the officers nodded and stepped back. The takeout bag rustled as Aaliyah adjusted her grip, the vouchers from Elena tucked inside like a folded blessing. News anchors, their voices lowered for gravity, spoke the name of the company, and then the wider word that lived behind it, justice, and they did so without teeth on the syllables. When Raymond returned to the local feed, it was not to bask. It was to remind everyone that a policy only matters when it changes how a person is treated at a counter and in a corridor. The message sounded almost like a prayer, and maybe it was. Later, the press office would publish the plan in careful paragraphs, and operations would send a letter to every station. Later, a training schedule would go out, and the ombud's address would light up with the kind of stories that asked for repair. Later, Elena would email her statement to a general inbox and receive a reply signed by a real name. But here, in this corridor of brushed metal and warm light, the change looked like something simple. Restore seats, the open rectangle of an aircraft door no longer shrinking as they approached, and strangers softening their eyes because they had seen a true land and stayed. Imani glanced at the phone, where the live feed had poured into thousands of small rooms and then closed, and she exhaled as if setting down a long-carried weight. Aaliyah looked at her sister and then back down the jet bridge, and when she spoke, the words belonged to both of them, and to anyone listening hard enough to remember later. We started this trip for college tours, but it turned into something much bigger. In the quiet after the storm, the image that lingered was not the boardroom vote or the halted planes, but the simple sight of 2 young women finally stepping forward without resistance, their dignity intact. For those who have lived long enough to see cycles repeat, the lesson feels both familiar and urgent. Prejudice may wear new uniforms, but it is still undone by truth, by evidence, and by the steady courage of people who refuse to bow their heads. The heart of this story is not punishment, but restoration, an insistence that compassion and accountability can stand together, and that even an ordinary witness, like a server in a busy restaurant, can tip the scales toward justice. Much like a lantern left burning in a farmhouse window on a dark night, one act of courage or kindness can guide weary travelers safely home. Take a moment, then, to reflect on the quiet lights in your own life. And if this story has touched you, consider passing that warmth along to someone still waiting in the shadows.